thanks so much to our good friends Ron and Brett for doing this. It's a very special book, which I've had the pleasure to read, as has Nolene, who's going to be doing the conversation. I'm due to bring in Nolene in a minute. The two things just from myself is we are recording this because we did want to allow some of the people who aren't able to be here to see this because it's really special. And also, the book is available for £25. Lawrence will be sending out to all of you, but also to the denominations, the chants and others to order the book. And it's £25, including postage. So JLC lead will bring in all the books there, and then we'll send them out individually to you. So £25, and that will go out to Lawrence. Lawrence, thank you very much for all you've done putting this together with me. It's been great fun. And Nolene, I'm going to hand over to you. Nolene is one of our trustees at London Jewish Forum, is also leader of community and former chair of ALITH and many other places. Incredible stuff in the community. And we're currently the chair also of the New Israel Fund, and handing over to Nolene from there.
Thank you, Andrew, and welcome. It is just wonderful to see so many familiar faces on screen and some less familiar faces. Firstly, a huge welcome to Dr. Ron Wolfson and Rabbi Brett Koppen. I think we're really looking forward to this informative, engaging session, and we couldn't expect anything else. Brett, I think working with Ron, how special it is, but being with you, Ron, and being with the person who's taught us so much about being relationally Jewish and relational Judaism. So thank you very much to both of you for joining us today. I too, as Andrew said, have had the pleasure of reading the book called Creating Sacred Communities. And as I sort of picked it up, I really thought about how do you bring together so many different views and perspectives, and really all credit to the two of you for bringing together master classes from masters in such a masterful way. It really has been a joy to read, and I enjoyed it so much more than I thought I would. Ron and Brett, just so that you both know, we have an incredible mix of and representation from our Jewish community on the screen today. And seeing us come together in this way is really heartwarming and an endorsement of your work. So thank you, everybody. It's lovely to see you on screen, and thank you for joining us. I'm just going to give you a sort of a rundown of how our hour is going to run. I'm going to ask Ron and Brett to introduce themselves very briefly in a moment. They'll speak for about 30 minutes on the book and just talk about their work and how they came to it and take some nuggets from the book. And then we'll have time for questions. I'm going to ask everyone to please use the hands up function because it's the best way for me to manage the questions. And I just feel because there are so many wonderful voices here, I'd love you to all ask your own question rather than do it in the chat, which we'll monitor. A plea, please ask a question. I know we've all got so much to say and so much to contribute to the conversation. If at the end there's a bit of time, I'd love to take some commentary as well from everyone on the screen. So we can do that. Please also do post in the chat. We'll monitor the chat, but certainly questions, hands up function, that would be great. So I'm going to hand over and say thank you again to Ron and Brett for joining us. If you'll do a short intro, and then we can head into the conversation.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you so much for inviting us. And kudos to the London Jewish Forum and to LEAD and your leadership. And it's wonderful to see so many good friends. And thanks for inviting us. I'm Ron Wolfson. I'm a professor of education at American Jewish University here in Los Angeles. And I'm privileged to teach this class called Creating Sacred Communities. We'll talk to you more about that in a minute. And I have several of my students on the call, and they're all the best students I ever had at American Jewish University and the Ziegler School. And one is Rabbi Brett Koppen. So please say hi, Brett.
Hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here. So I am also calling in from Los Angeles. It is 8:06 in the morning over here, and it's wonderful to be with all of you. And then I'll just add, I feel a very strong connection with the UK Jewish community. I am the writer of a short animated film called The Tattooed Torah, which is a story that is deeply involved with the Czech Memorial Trust in Westminster Synagogue. And I had the opportunity a few years ago to actually go and visit and make connections there. And so it's just wonderful to be back with this amazing representation of the community again. And we're excited to share our book with all of you.
So I think we should start by telling you how the book came to be. I've been teaching now for maybe 20 years at the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies here at the American Jewish University, a course called Creating Sacred Communities. And due to the pandemic, of course, in 2021, in the spring semester, I taught the course completely on Zoom, of course. As some of you know, my wife, Susie, received a kidney transplant the year before. I donated one of my kidneys on her behalf, went to a lovely stranger in Florida by the name of Sally Throckmorton, who herself was a Christian educator. Her husband is a Southern Baptist minister who went to seminary with our friend Rick Warren. We'll talk about him in a minute. The famous mega pastor. And when she found out that I wrote books of Jewish wisdom, she said she was so blessed to receive a Jewish kidney. And she named my kidney in her body Solomon. In any case, Brett was one of my students in the class in the spring of 2021. And because we were on Zoom, I could invite some of my best friends who are doing the cutting edge work of creating sacred communities, certainly in North America. And in the middle of the semester, I said to my students, you know, these sessions are so terrific, it would make a good book. And Brett took me up on the offer and said, you know, if you really want someone to help you with this, Ron, I have the summer off. And before I start working at Milken High School, and I can help you with it. I thought we would spend hours and hours, weeks transcribing these sessions from the Zoom calls. But it turns out there's an AI program called Otter, and it transcribed everything in about 5 minutes per session. So what we have in the book is 14 masters of creating sacred community. These are lay people, these are rabbis from across denominations. Pastor Rick Warren showed up and did a fantastic session. And what we've done is we've edited these sessions and put them together in the book. So it's kind of a peek into a masterclass. I didn't call it a masterclass. The people who read the draft called it a masterclass in creating sacred community. What we thought we would do this morning, or this afternoon in your case, is give you brief snippets from some of these wonderful guests we had and their chapters in the book. We began with, of course, work on relational Judaism, and just to remind those of you who may not know about that work, I believe there are 3 tiers of relationship we have to concern ourselves with in creating sacred community. One tier is to connect our people with the beauty and the power and the meaning of Jewish experiences itself. And we're pretty good at this. We're good at showing that synagogues and sacred communities, independent minyanim, whatever you want to call them, congregations, provide a path to meaning, what's it all about, purpose, why did God put us on this earth, belonging, a sense of community, and a place to celebrate the many blessings in our lives. That's the first tier, and we're good at it. The second tier is connecting our people to each other so that there's a group of people who will be there with them in good times and bad. And boy, if we never learned that during the pandemic, I don't know when we've learned it. We've learned that a synagogue is not a building. A synagogue is a community of sacred relationships. And the third tier is between the representatives of the congregation and the people we're serving. Whether clergy, educator, executive director, or lay leader, how do we connect with them so they feel they have someone who sees them and listens to them? You know, the watchword in Judaism is not Daber Yisrael, it's Shema Yisrael. It's not, let me tell you about my synagogue. It's, please tell me, I want to listen to your story. One of our guests in this book, Rabbi Ed Feinstein from Valley Beth Shalom here in Los Angeles, says to our prospective rabbis, remember this is a rabbinical school class. So he says to these rabbis, the most important thing to remember as a rabbi is this: people are going to tell you that being a great rabbi is about speaking well. It is not. The greater skill of a rabbi is how you listen. People who are able to really listen are people who make great rabbis. I know you have great rabbis there in the UK. So that's just one little idea from Rabbi Feinstein. And Brett, why don't you tell them about another rabbi, this time in Canada?
Thanks, Ron. So in our class, I had the privilege of meeting one of Ron's longtime friends, Rabbi Dan Moskowitz, who's the rabbi of Temple Shalom in Vancouver, in Canada. And he had this idea that he said that this is what he did when he first started out as a rabbi. And I just graduated in May, so my ears perked up when he said, this is what he did when he first began. He said that he would block out about 4 to 5 hours every week in his schedule. He would have his office assistant block out all this time, and he would take the Yortzeit list from that week. So the list of names that he was going to call on the Bima, and he would call like the primary contacts of every name on that list. Number one, just to say to them, I know that it is your loved one's Yortzeit this week. And he said oftentimes people wouldn't even, not that they wouldn't remember, but maybe they didn't get the notice from the synagogue. They didn't remember that it was that particular week. But then he would say to them, I don't want to just go up on the Bima and say a name of a person that I don't know anything about. Can you please tell me a story or some kind of connection with your loved one? And they would, and he would spend, again, 4 to 5 hours a week just in these conversations with people, listening to these stories of these wonderful people who had passed away and who he was going to say their name on the Bima. And then, of course, he would then go the next step of saying, and then, please, would love to see you at Shul this week to, as I say the name on the Bima. And he said that to this day, he still pulls capital from those calls. That because he took the extra effort of talking to somebody for some people, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, some people probably for longer, half hour, 45 minutes. He says that to this day, people, he still pulls from those calls. That was one of the best investments of his time that he had made. And I told my friend at lunch that story, and his eyes widened when I told him that story. He said, oh my God, he's actually about to start at Leo Beck Temple in Los Angeles. He said, when I start my rabbinate, I'm totally going to do that. And I said, yeah, Scott, that's just one idea in this book. I mean, the book is full of ideas like that, but this rabbi, Dan Moskowitz, is very, very special. And it's definitely something that I'm going to strive to do as well in my own rabbinate. All right, Ron, back to you.
Yeah. So it's a tremendous idea and really fantastic. His congregation has gained 40% in membership in the last 5 years he's been there. And Rabbi Moskowitz credits that work in helping him build relationships with his people. Rabbis Nicole Auerbach at Central Synagogue and Rabbi Lydia Medwin at the Temple were my co-authors of the Relational Judaism Handbook. We had them come to visit us, and they have a chapter in the book discussing how they've done the work of building small groups in their large congregations. They learned this from Rick Warren, we'll talk about in a minute, this mega pastor in Orange County, California. And at Saddleback Church, Rick's church, the question is always, are you a community with small groups? Or are you a community of small groups? And to do the work of small group development, as Lydia and Nicole describe it in the book, it really revolves around hearing people's stories, the basic community organizing principles, and then linking people together in small groups around four possible ways of organizing. The first is affinity, what people like to do together. So there are all sorts of groups that continue, by the way, through the pandemic. Torah study groups, certainly, but social justice groups and cooking groups and people taking bike rides together. And you say, this is what a sacred community is about? Yes, because there are many ways into sacred community. So affinity is the first. Demography, life stage is the second. Geography by neighborhood turned out to be a great way to connect people into small groups. And availability, when people can gather together. So I love this chapter in the book because it gives, again, real success in building small groups as a way to think of how you create a sacred community and connection with our people. Brett?
So we also had the privilege of meeting with Rabbi Sharon Brous and Melissa Balaban of ICAR, which is this incredible progressive community in Los Angeles. And so we wanted to share just a short snippet of our conversation with them. We asked them this question of, what is the secret sauce of ICAR? So the two of them started ICAR about, Ron, what was it, about 20 years ago?
Yeah, 18
years ago. And the very first meeting was with 7 people in Rabbi Brous's living room. And very quickly they began to grow. And now, especially around the high holidays, they get thousands of people. Now that they've gone online, 10,000 people, it's really incredible what they've built. And so the question is, what's their secret? What's the secret sauce of their community? So what they said was, the secret sauce for ICAR was that we lowered the bar for entry, but we raised the bar for engagement. So I'll say that again. They lowered the bar for entry and they raised the bar for engagement. We're trying to make it so that everybody can feel at home here. But at the same time, we need it to be challenging and meaningful and demanding in ways that I think a lot of Jewish places shy away from. We are asking, what would it mean if we actually ask something of people? What if we said, to be in this space, there's something that we're hoping you'll give us. It's not your cash. It's your spirit, it's your time, it's your love. We're asking you to open your hearts. You're here anyway. You may as well try.
Yeah, Brett, it's interesting. ICAR has grown to 1,100 families in 18 years from 7 people. During the pandemic, they gained 200 members online. They call these people ICAR from afar members. 200 members who pay money to belong to the congregation, even though they are way beyond the geographic borders of Los Angeles. And when you join ICAR, there are 4 expectations. I don't know of another synagogue that says, we expect you to do these 4 things. We need you to bring your talents and passions and volunteer. We're a short-staffed community. Number 2, we expect everyone to keep learning. Number 3, everyone is expected to work somehow on social justice. That's part of their secret sauce, the nexus of spirituality and social justice. And the 4th thing on their list of expectation is making a financial contribution, not the first thing, the 4th thing. So that's remarkable. Now, another great thing that happened during the semester was my friend Rick Warren. I've known Rick since 1995. Rick is an extraordinary creator of sacred communities. He knows more about it than anybody in the world. And we had him in the class, and he gives a brilliant session talking about how he built the church, first of all, which was to build a place open to seekers, people who otherwise would never come into a church. In fact, he went door to door in Orange County, California, a suburb of, down south in Southern California, south of Los Angeles. And he said, do you belong to a church? And if the people said yes, he said, God bless you. And he moved on to the next door. And if the people said no, he asked why? Why aren't you part of a sacred community? And they gave him interesting answers. The service is boring. The music is old. I don't like to get dressed up on Sunday morning. I don't trust the childcare. And Rick went ahead and built a sacred community to counter those impressions, to create a place where people would hear a message on Sunday that they could use on Monday. Now imagine if we thought of Torah study as not just studying the text, but how this story in the Torah relates to your life. To be able to say to people, you belong to this sacred community, your life will be different. We shy away from that in Jewish life. And it's one of the things we learned from Rick, that not to be afraid to say to people, you join our sacred community, your life will be deeper, more meaningful, and engaging. And then the next week, we had Rabbi Moti Seligson, who's the director of media relations at Chabad Lubavitch International. And Rabbi Seligson talked about the answer to this question that I asked him. Why did the Rebbe send a shaliach to a community for life? And the answer was that when you send a rabbi into a community for life, they create relationships, long-lasting relationships. They become the fabric of the community. And I know many of my rabbi friends on this call have been at their congregations for many, many years. And you know that if you're not moving around from place to place, you really create those deep relationships. And Rick had several more wonderful things in his chapter. Brett, sending it to you.
So the week after that, we met with Dr. Bruce Powell, who's also, Ron, I'll just give you a little plug. He's also Ron's co-author in it's Making A+ Human Beings, right?
Raising A+.
Raising, I'm sorry. Raising A+ Human Beings, also an amazing book. And Dr. Powell, he's spent his career building incredible institutions, actually including Milken. He's one of the major people behind the founding of Milken. And so he had this to say to us. He said, my mentor, a man by the name of Shlomo Bardin, was speaking to the faculty club at Columbia University in 1930 and said, American education is too much about measuring and not enough about meaning. I probably heard that when I was 15 years old. So 57 years ago, it created an explosion in my mind and in my life. It became the guiding piece of my educational philosophy as I grew up. And it also became the underpinnings of this notion of creating a culture in a place. Whether it's a synagogue or a camp, or a company or a school, it doesn't matter. All the principles are the same. We have to be more about meaning than we are about measuring. And what I have to, one of the wonderful things about taking Ron's class my last year of school is that now I'm currently a high school teacher. I teach 5 classes for 9th and 10th grade. Literally every single time I write a lesson plan now, I always think about Dr. Powell's line right here that he learned from Shlomo Bardin about we have to be more about meaning and less about measuring. And it was one comment that he made in about an hour and a half long class that we took with him. Literally every single time I step into the classroom, I always say, okay, so today is going to be more about meaning, less about measuring. And that it's really been a guiding principle for my whole teaching philosophy.
The next chapter we want to talk about briefly is from Rabbi Jonathan Bernhardt at Adat Ariel, a conservative synagogue here in Los Angeles. In the book Relational Judaism, I made the point that once people leave a sacred community, it's hard to get them back. And during the pandemic, I don't know exactly what's happened there in London, but over here on this side of the pond, there's no question that synagogues have declined in membership. So the big question facing us, of course, and we might pick this up in the conversation in a few minutes, is how do we get people back? Well, one of the ways Adat Ariel got people back before the pandemic was when they spent 2 years studying the sustainability model of revenue creation, dues. Because over here, this is the major way synagogues raise money, is the annual dues. When they went to sustainability model, which is basically, this is what it costs to run our sacred community. And this is a suggested amount, but anybody can give from their heart what they're able to give. Some people call this voluntary dues, but people over here don't like that term. But when they went to sustainability model, this congregation went back to people who had left the community 5 to 10 years when they started this. They invited the people to come back on this basis, this sustainability model, pay what you will. 80 members returned, former members, 80 returned to membership in the congregation. They were so grateful to be invited back on that basis. And that's kind of amazing. There are two very powerful lay people we had in the class who have chapters. Janice Kaminer-Resnick was a partner with Rabbi Harold Schulweis at Valley Beth Shalom here in Los Angeles. Janice is an attorney who just got stimulated by Rabbi Schulweis's plea to the congregation one Yom Kippur to not stand idly by in the Jewish community as the genocide was happening in Darfur. So Janice and Rabbi Schulweis, a layperson and a rabbi, created something called Jewish World Watch, which enlisted 70 congregations in the Los Angeles area to raise awareness and to raise money to support these folks in Darfur. It's an amazing experience. And Janice in the book describes how that partnership worked. And you all know the partnership between lay people and clergy is absolutely essential in creating sacred community. And another wonderful lay person came to the class by the name of Norman Levine, who is the president of his synagogue. And he says to these young rabbis, a lay leader who's a president of a synagogue, and I know we have some on the call today, has three main tasks, according to Norm. He thought his job as president was to do these three things. First, to not be the rabbi, but to ensure that the rabbi has all the resources necessary to do their job. Second, to take a bullet for the rabbi when there is a problem in the congregation, to have the rabbi's back, to support the rabbi in whatever the rabbi's message is to the congregation. And third, his thought was, nobody wants to talk to Norm Levine, but everybody wants to talk to the president of the shul. So he would stand at the entry of the congregation, of the sanctuary, every Shabbat, every Chag, to greet people as they came in. And he would announce from the bima, from the pulpit, at the end of the service, I will be at the Oneg Shabbat. I'm happy to chat with you. He was present. He was a representative. He was the ambassador of the congregation. And I think that's so important for our wonderful lay leadership to understand their role. There are others in the book, Mike Uram, on how to engage young professionals, Rabbi Josh Warshawski on how to do engaging prayer experiences, and a wonderful foreword to the book by Rabbi Angela Buchdahl from Central Synagogue in New York. But at that, we've done our 30 minutes. I think now, Nolene, we ought to open it up for everyone.
Thank you, Ron. Just unmuting. Thank you, Ron, and thank you, Brett. I think you've taken some really important nuggets, and I've been through the book and found some really huge lessons. So I have some questions, but I'd love to open up for questions, and I think I can see them on my screen. So if you use the hand up function, or if you put your hand up, I'll see if I can see you on the screen. Any questions for starters? Okay, so I'll start with a couple. In the book, Ron and Brett, there's a conversation about the ambience of welcome. Can you just expand a little on it? It was a term that came out and really struck me as being something we should be cognizant of.
So the very first book I wrote about this relational Judaism idea is called The Spirituality of Welcoming. Again, it's available at Jewish Lights Publishing. And that's when I coined this term, the ambience of welcoming. Look, all we have to do is study the chapter in Torah Vayera, Abraham and Sarah's tent. You all know the story. Abraham sitting in the entrance of the tent in the heat of the day. 3 strangers come by, and what does Abraham do? He runs to greet them. As a matter of fact, if you look closely at the text, there are 5 versions of the verb running in that, the first 8 pasukim, the first 8 lines of that text. He runs to greet them, even though he just circumcised himself at the age of 99. So may I talk to the men in the room for a minute here? He runs to greet them. And then what does he do? He offers them a little bit of water and a morsel of bread. These 3 strangers. But then what does he do? He goes to Sarah and to the servant boy, and they create a feast for these strangers. In the quality service community, that's called under-promising and over-delivering. He surprised his guests, he and Sarah. How can you surprise your guests and your members in your congregation? When they come back in person, are you going to give them something special, some surprise, not only a warm welcome? Listen, everyone who I know who's been back in person in synagogue life in the last couple of months here on this side of the pond has said people are so thrilled to be back in person. But can we go in the next step? Can we surprise them? Can we give them a gift? Can we do something extraordinary that makes concrete this idea of welcoming our people into community? That's the idea of an ambience of welcome.
Thank you, Ron. I'm going to take a question from Amos and then from Rosalind.
Nolene, thank you. This has been really fascinating, both. I'm interested, you obviously, this is framed as sacred communities, which is, you specifically didn't say, creating shuls or creating congregations, but the examples that you've referenced, by and large, are shuls and congregations. So I'm wondering what learnings can be taken from outside of that world, where there's also huge amounts of innovation and ones that can be brought in.
Yes, there's a lot of innovation. Look, this was a class specifically for rabbinic students in creating sacred community. Now, sacred community to me can be called congregation, synagogue, shul, independent minyan. One of the things that we've learned from some of these cutting edge folks like Ikar is not to pigeonhole ourselves so much with labels. That's not to deny ideology and mission. But one of the things we found is, particularly for a younger generation.
Sorry, I was actually, I couldn't get through, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is such a terrible person.
We've certainly learned this. We've certainly learned this from a lot of the startups over here, that to reach people who are not especially interested in joining an organization, whether it's a synagogue or any other organization, labels can be barriers. So we learned that lesson. But this specific class was for rabbis to create the sacred communities of synagogues, shuls, independent minyanim, and so on. But we brought in to the conversation in the book, and you'll see this in the book, lots of lessons from everything from the Disney Corporation to Home Depot, to a variety of other resources of organizations that are really good at welcoming, creating relationships. I tell this story in the book about my Chase bank teller, who sent me a card on my birthday, a birthday card. Here's what it said. It came in the real mail. It said, "Dear Mr. Wolfson, when you were in the branch last week, you mentioned for your birthday, your grandchildren were coming to visit. How was the visit?" This is in a card I got sent in the mail. "Next time they're in Los Angeles, please bring them by the branch so we might meet them. Have a wonderful day. Sincerely, Valerie, your Chase bank teller." Now, I've gotten lots of things, emails, blasts, and mailings from my synagogue that I belong to, but I've never gotten a handwritten note from the rabbi. I've never gotten a handwritten note from a president of a synagogue. I've gotten lots of form letters and lots of form email blasts, but that personal touch is a lesson in this book.
And I'll just jump in here and I'll say, so my first job is not in a synagogue. I'm in a high school. And like I said, when I was talking about Bruce Powell, so many of the principles from this book are so applicable and so transferable to the classroom. So again, what I learned from Ron was it's all about relationships. So every class, I teach 5 classes. Every single class begins with dedications to our learning. So every student gets the opportunity to say, I want to dedicate my learning today to my grandmother is sick, she's in the hospital, or it's my friend's birthday, or my sports team just won this, or we have a competition coming up. And it's just a way to get to know the students before we actually dive into the learning. And then we end the dedications with a blessing for studying Torah. And so that personal touch of, okay, so before we get started here, this classroom we have 1 hour together. This is a sacred community. So let's make this personal. Let's relate Torah to our own lives and say, okay, so the energy that we're bringing into the classroom through our studying and through our learning could have a tangible effect on these other people who need some blessing. That's been a great learning experience for me. But again, it's all, I would say that every principle that I've learned that applies to a synagogue could easily be transferable to the classroom.
Thank you, Brett. Thanks, Ron. Rosalind, I'm going to take your question, please.
Thank you very much. Fascinating insights. I just wanted to ask a post-COVID era question about Zoom contact versus physical contact, and thinking about your comment of lowering the barrier to entry and then raising it to engage. Certainly in our synagogue in London, our experience was that Zoom helped people who might not go into the physical sanctuary to be part of it. And then, but it's complicated. And I wondered if you had some insights both ways about the do's and don'ts of where virtual connections help, don't help, when you're trying to have events which offer both routes of participation actually in the sanctuary versus online. What your experience has been? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. We're all facing that now, for sure. An article that I wrote recently with Professor Stephen Windmuller from Hebrew College, in fact, I think will be published tomorrow in Tablet magazine online. It's called The Rise of the Online Synagogue. And we tackle this exact question. So the first thing to say is that Zoom has been a blessing during the pandemic for keeping our sacred communities going, no question about it. Second thing to say about it is what all of you leaders of synagogues have done by going online as quickly as you did is absolutely miraculous. Nes gadol, a great miracle. And what happened is that once people learned the technology of Zoom and the content, whether it was a worship experience or a study experience or a social justice meeting or just a gathering, the combination of the two kept our communities alive. Now that we're coming back in person, it's glorious on the one hand, but there are still many, many people who are going to be hesitant to come back in person. Yours truly is one, because my wife is immunocompromised. And I'm worried that I would go into a sanctuary now with people not wearing masks, and God forbid I pick up the virus and bring it back to my wife. It would be devastating, could be devastating. So there are many, many people who will continue to access community online. What's extraordinary about what's happening is that some of the communities over here have understood that these people who've been online actually feel a sense of belonging to the community. You know, if you asked me 3 years ago, is it possible to have a sacred community online? I would say that's ridiculous. You have to be in person. Guess what? That's not the case. I've changed my mind completely. It is community. So at Central Synagogue, which is one of the large progressive synagogues in the United States, they've now created something called the neighborhood, which is 446 households representing about 650 people who are in the first cohort they call the neighborhood. This is the online community. They've assigned a rabbi, a rabbinic intern, to serve these people and to help build small groups among them online and to go beyond just watching a service on a Friday night, okay? I mentioned Ikar from afar, 200 new members from all over the world. And all of you in the UK, I'm sure, have people who come in online from all over the world. And the question is, can we do both? Can we sustain the in-person community, of course, and this online community? Rabbi Elaine Zecker, who's a rabbi at Temple Israel in Boston, told us that she's got a sanctuary that has 2 large walls parallel to the seating in the congregation. They now project, this is a Reform congregation, progressive congregation, liberal congregation. They now project the screens of their online community on either wall during their services. And then the people on site can feel part of the community as well. All of them part of it. In fact, she's now banned the word virtual from their conversations. She says it's mixed presence, she calls it, mixed presence. You're on site or you're online, but nobody's virtual, everybody is there. So I think it's a challenge to do both well, but it's an opportunity for us to grow our sacred communities, and which is something we all want to do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. I'm going to take a question from Rabbi Alex Goldberg, and then I'll take one from Rabbi Epstein.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Brett. Brett, you've triggered something in me because you've said your sacred community is a school. By way of a background, I'm Dean of Religious Life at a university in the UK, which gave me a lot of property and a lot of online technical support. So 2 things happened. One, we had the largest COVID-friendly venue in the south of England on our university campus, which meant we could do services in person when other people couldn't, which is great. The second thing is we set up Facebook Live with 8 faiths and had 1 million views over a 12-month period. The third thing was some of the lecturers got lonely, so I put them together on Zoom. This is an area where officially, according to the UK census, there are 250 Jews. We now have 150 Jewish people who are in families, non-students, who are part of a community, which has a very silly name because we didn't think it would last. My question to Brett and to Ron is it time for me, only 25% of those Jews ever belonged to synagogues, 75% didn't. And they now are meeting each other, they're now a community. If you ask them their denominational background, they'll say Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, Masorti, Reconstructionist, Renewal, things that we don't actually know about in the UK, but they are, because we've got Americans and Israelis here. So do I give them back to the community? Do we create new community? Has COVID been a disruptor So that suburban movement of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, which built American Judaism and actually probably built British Judaism. And what do we do with this disruptor? Brett, is your school now a sacred space in a community? Parents, graduates, and whatever? Ron, have you seen other examples of this, of new style communities coming together in new ways, which are now meeting in person?
Yeah. Brett?
Yes, I would say in terms of Milken, we've definitely slowly treaded back into the water. I mean, we were wearing, masks up until, a month and a half ago, but there's been a huge push and a huge effort to bring people back into the facility, to engage parents. There's a huge effort to engage alumni now as well, and that's not virtual. That means in person, going to renting out spaces in bars, doing things that people would enjoy doing, and really a major push and a major effort to see the community not just as the students or the parents, but really the alumni, the faculty, down to the point where we have a gala coming up in May, honoring past chairs of the board. There are currently 800 people that are signed up to come, and that includes parents, alumni, friends of the community, and they've also, and this is very relational, they found a sponsor to allow all of the faculty to come for free. So it's a $360 ticket, but again, like those gestures are huge, because it ups the morale. It shows us that we're very valued, and it really, it sends a very large message. So I do think there's been a major push to create community in many of these different sectors. Ron, do you have something to add to that?
Well, I would just say, Rabbi, that there are a number of groups that are creating new kinds of gatherings, new kinds of sacred community. There are pop-up minyanim. There are independent minyanim. There's a group over here called the Jewish Emergent Network that are these very interesting sacred communities like Ikar, Romamu in New York, The Kitchen in San Francisco, Kavanah in Seattle, which calls itself a spiritual cooperative, Mishkan in Chicago. These are Lab Shul, Amichai Lau-Levi's place in New York. These are cutting edge sacred communities, successful in gathering people who normally would not walk into our traditional congregations. And that's extraordinary, and that's wonderful. And we should see more of that, because over here, I would guess in 2013, the Pew study of American Judaism said that there were 39% of households said one person, at least one person, belonged to a synagogue. My guess is after the pandemic, if we did that study again, we would be down in the low 30%. That means there are 60 to 70% of American Jews who do not currently belong to a sacred community. There's a huge need. I don't know what your figures are in the UK, but there's a huge need to find ways to connect people to Judaism in sacred community, whether it's a traditional kind of thinking about a synagogue or a shul or a school, or these kinds of new forms of sacred community that ought to flourish, I think, in the decade to come.
I'll also just add that we have a program. So I teach in a program at Milken, which is called the Beit Midrash program. And you have to elect to be in this as a student. You have to get into it. But there are about 60 or 70, or actually, I think more like 80 students in this program. And it's not just learning in a classroom. We do Shabbat dinners, we do Shabbatonim. When it was Purim, we had a Megillah reading together. And so again, like that's a way for us. Every Rosh Chodesh, we do a special Rosh Chodesh lunch. So that's a way of us creating a very particular community within the larger school community as well. So it's just another idea.
Thank you, Brett. Thanks, Ron. Really interesting and a whole new world for us to explore here in the UK, much more so than in America, where I think what Rabbi Goldberg is talking about is very nascent. And I think we will maybe see more of it, but how we make more of it is our challenge in the UK. We're a little bit behind, but I think there's definitely a moment. Rabbi Epstein, a question from you.
Yes, firstly, thank you very much indeed. It's a real a pleasure and honor to be here. I'm from the Western Marble Arch Synagogue, an Orthodox synagogue in central London. We have been writing, my wife, in fact, has been writing letters, cards to every single person in our community, every yahrzeit, every birthday, every anniversary. I think she's been through about 2,000 handwritten cards in the last 13 months. It's pretty amazing. That the reason with that was that we don't have a chance to meet people during the pandemic. And we just started in our community 13 months ago. So we really needed to kickstart relationships. And that really has generated some really interesting responses. People write back their life stories in return to that, because as you said, it's really quite unusual to get a personalized letter in that way. And that people have actually asked now that, okay, you've done a whole year, thank you very much. Please don't, you don't have to wrthat anymore. But we continued and they said, well, actually, it's nice to get them. So we'll keep going until we can't, but that's nice. One of the things we're doing also that we've had is that try to engage much more with the wider community, not just the Jewish community, but reach out into other communities. So whether I'm going for walks in Hyde Park with my priest at the Annunciation Marble Arch, which is around the church opposite on the other side of the square to me, and he started at the same time as me, so we have a chavruta every couple of weeks. We go for a walk, and he's my priest, I'm his rabbi. It works well. And with the Ukrainian issue, I realized that the Ukrainian bishop of the Ukrainian church in London was really struggling. So we had him for Friday night dinner with about 70 people from the community, and then set up a Zoom call to connect him with some of the top people in the community in terms of setting up an asylum at his church. To make sure that he'll have it. And again, the skills that we have in our community, all of us, I think, just by nature of the fact that we are the eternal immigrants, means that we know how to do, picking up and getting started somewhere else. And I think we underestimate the capacity and our skills to be able to help people who are on the move. And so that, I think, was very helpful. But my question to you is that we're thinking, well, actually, as soon as Pesach is over, we're going to start marketing Rosh Hashanah. And for me, that was a realization that it's not enough to just use Elul, which is the customary time to get started, but people need a good real few months to get themselves back into the mood for Rosh Yom Kippur. And does anybody else have any similar ideas to actually start to push already into the high holy days for not just bums on seats, excuse the phrase, but engagement on what they'd like to learn, send out new tunes, get people involved, so that when the day comes, they're really looking forward to something they've been preparing for anyway.
Yeah, it's a great question, Rabbi, and Yasher Koach on your wonderful work. I think that it's going to take personal invitation to get people back, to get those bums in seats. I do. Some people are rushing back to in-person engagement, but some people, even some of our regulars, have lost the muscle memory of coming to shul. Look, there's no doubt that it's been convenient for some people to watch things online, to not get dressed, to enjoy a glass of Chardonnay with their Shabbat worship in certain ways. For those who can do the live streaming, and there will still be this percentage of people who are going to continue to be hesitant to come back in person. But I think it's going to take personal invitation. I think that, taking this page out of your book, I think that starting in May and June, if you had a campaign to make phone calls, to deepen that person-to-person engagement, which, by the way, can be done on the phone, it can be done on Zoom. I always tell leaders of sacred communities, whenever you gather a group of people together, have a relational moment. When I did in-person lecturing, I would spend 5 minutes of my sermon time asking a question of the group and then sending people to meet someone in the sanctuary they did not know. Meet someone you don't know. Introduce yourself and then answer one of these questions. What keeps you up at night? That's what you're worried about. What gets you up in the morning? That's what excites you. Or where are you at in your life? 5 minutes and the sanctuary would explode because people would get up, physically get up, and meet someone in the room they didn't know. And that's a demonstration of the importance of relationship building. So I think that finding ways to connect people in person and on Zoom is the way to go.
Thank you, Ron. Brett, we're coming to the end of our hour. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that was a great response.
Cool. Great, yeah. Thank you. I have a one more question, but I think we're going to run out of time. I'm going to just sort of, if we can sort of think about it in a short way. We talk a lot about innovation, and today we've spoken about innovative ways around community. And in the book, someone spoke about entrepreneurship around community, which is something different to innovation. And I think, if we think about new communities, emerging communities, but also how to sustain our communities, how are we entrepreneurial in community and not just innovative?
Well, I believe in, somebody once called me an educational entrepreneur. I thought that was a lovely compliment. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. So what do entrepreneurs do? Entrepreneurs find a gap, mind the gap. They find a gap and a need in the community and seek to address it. And there are plenty of gaps in our Jewish communities. And if we identify those gaps and we work hard to fill them with creative and innovative approaches to engaging people, we listen to their stories. I return to my first point, Shema Yisrael, listen to our people, connect them to each other. I think we can be entrepreneurial. And that's a great way to end. Rabbi Angela Buckdahl says in the foreword to this book, I absolutely believe that synagogues and some of our deeply rooted institutions can be entrepreneurial when their driving force has to be continued innovation and change and willing to take some risks along the way. You've compiled in this book the spiritual practices of some of the greatest practitioners. So taking the principles that have driven these spiritual leaders and then adapting them to your own personal community by thinking about how you evolve and adapt, well, there can be no higher calling than the creation of sacred communities. The power of this book will be in a community read. If you can acquire this book for your leadership, your clergy, your lay leadership, your boards, your teachers, and read it together, there are questions at the end of every chapter. You could all be literally on the same page to be thinking about the great challenge and the great opportunity of building sacred communities there in London and in the UK. Thank you for inviting both of us to join you today.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Brett. I know Michelle wanted to say thank you, but just from very quickly from me, Ron, we learn all the time from you, and we've learned a bit more today. And Brett, I wish my children had been in your school, because having a relational teacher like you is a real joy. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. Michelle.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think at a time when we're really looking to rebuild, reconnect and re-engage, the thoughts and learnings that we've had here and that will come out of the book, to be on the same page will be really powerful. A huge thank you. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure to be able to host you today with the London Jewish Forum, and to see so many wonderful partners and leaders in our community. So thank you to all of you, and hopefully we can meet in real life to talk about some of these things very soon. So to Ron, to you, Rabbi Brett, thank you also so much.